My name is Victor, and it's strange how a single choice in a single moment can tear apart everything you believed was secure. For me, that moment came when my wife went on her younger sister's Bachelorette getaway. It may sound innocent enough, but what unfolded during that trip ended up destroying our marriage. Today, I want to share how it all began and how everything unraveled. Sophia and I had been married for 2 years. We were no longer newlyweds, but still early enough in our journey to be discovering and building things together. Like any couple, we had our share of highs and lows. There were plenty of wonderful memories, and I always viewed her as someone reliable, someone I could count on. We'd reached a stage where trust held everything in place. But even the strongest foundations can hide cracks, and sometimes those fractures start so small, they're easy to miss. One of the early concerns I noticed, back when we were still dating, was Sophia's relationship with alcohol. It was never about how much she drank. Even a single glass could completely change her behavior. It was like flipping a switch. She knew it too. We'd had several emotional conversations after nights that didn't go well. There were heartfelt apologies, tearful discussions, and promises to do better. Eventually, she acknowledged that drinking just didn't sit right with her, and we agreed she'd stop altogether. It became an unspoken rule between us, especially after we tied the knot. Once we were married, things took a quieter turn. We left behind the loud parties and chaotic nights. We both agreed that phase of life was behind us. We wanted to start a family, and that meant creating a healthy, stable environment. Sophia was just as committed as I was, and together, we embraced that lifestyle change. So, when Sophia told me during our 2nd year of marriage that she was finally pregnant, barely a month along, it was one of those moments that etches itself into your memory. I remember every word she used and the way her eyes sparkled with excitement. It was the kind of happiness you think will last forever. But only a few days after she shared that beautiful news, her younger sister invited her to a bachelorette weekend in Miami. Now, let me be honest, Sophia's sister had always been the more carefree and impulsive type. Bold, loud, and often reckless. Naturally, I had my reservations. A group trip with girls I'd only heard wild stories about, many of whom I'd never even met, didn't exactly inspire confidence. I wasn't okay with it, and I didn't pretend to be. I told Sophia how I felt. I won't be there to keep an eye on things. I know how these kinds of trips go, and I know how your sister tends to be. I'm just not comfortable with this. My concerns only grew knowing she was in the early stages of pregnancy, emotionally and physically more fragile than usual. But Sophia reassured me again and again. She insisted it was just a harmless girls' weekend. She promised to let them know she was expecting and said she wouldn't be drinking at all. She told me not to worry, that she'd be responsible. I chose to trust her. She had never given me a reason not to. I even helped her pack, folded her clothes while she picked out her shoes. I drove her to the airport, kissed her goodbye, and told her to enjoy herself but stay safe. Then I came back to an empty, quiet house, doing my best to keep my mind from spiraling into worst-case scenarios. I stayed occupied, keeping myself busy with anything I could find, anything to keep my hands moving and my thoughts from drifting to places they didn't belong. At that time, I genuinely believed everything would be all right. 3 days later, when Sophia's flight landed, I went to pick her up from the airport. She appeared through the arrival gate looking a bit worn out, but there was a smile on her face. She came over, pressed a quick kiss to my cheek, and wrapped me in a brief hug. During the drive home, she was unusually talkative, chatting about how much fun she'd had. According to her, the whole weekend was just a carefree party, a girls' night filled with good music, great food, and the kind of energy her sister needed to unwind before the wedding. She described the trip as nothing more than laughter, dancing, and sisterly bonding. Hearing her recount it so openly, I believed her. I thought to myself, all right, she managed everything exactly as she said she would. But over the following days, I began to sense a growing distance from Sophia, even in our private moments. I would reach out to hold her at night, try to initiate intimacy or even just cuddle, only to have her quietly pull away or say she was too tired. At first, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Pregnancy was still new for her, and I figured it was probably morning sickness, mood swings, or just her body adjusting to the changes. Hormones, after all, can be unpredictable. So when I asked gently if she was all right and she replied, "I'm just really exhausted," I didn't press further. I trusted her answer, not wanting to be the husband who jumps to negative conclusions when his wife admits she isn't feeling her best. About 2 weeks after Sophia returned from that Bachelorette weekend in Miami, we were both preparing for her sister's wedding, set for the following weekend. One morning, after a quick grocery run, my phone buzzed with a message from an old friend, someone I trusted enough not to ignore. The message read, "I saw the video. It didn't look good. Hope you're holding up." I stared at those words for a long moment, confused. What video? What was he talking about? Was this message meant for someone else? I had no clue. I replied quickly, asking, "What video? What do you mean?" I could see he'd read my message, but he didn't respond. That's when I called him directly. When he answered, I could hear hesitation in his voice, an apologetic tone even before I spoke. He began, "Bro, I didn't know you hadn't seen it. I'm really sorry. I wouldn't have sent it if I'd known." I cut him off, telling him to stop avoiding the point. I needed to see what he was referring to. After another pause, he said, "All right, man. I'm sending it now. Brace yourself." Seconds later, the video arrived. It was a short clip, less than a minute long, but it felt endless. The shaky, grainy footage looked like it had been shot on a phone. Despite the poor quality, I immediately recognized Sophia. She was wearing a tight dress and clearly intoxicated. Her movements were loose, uninhibited. She was kissing a shirtless man, probably a stripper or bartender, while a crowd of women cheered them on in the background. Sophia then climbed onto his lap, wrapped her arms around his neck, and whispered something in his ear. Her lips were pressed right against his skin. I don't know what she said, and honestly, I didn't want to find out. I watched the clip 3 times in a row, not because I wanted to, but because I had to be sure I hadn't missed anything, some detail that might explain what was really happening. But there was no mistake. It was her, and she was clearly drunk. The same woman who had looked me straight in the eye and promised never to touch alcohol again, especially now that she was pregnant. The same woman who had reassured me before the trip that it was just a harmless girls' weekend and that she would be responsible. As I sat there on the couch, betrayal wasn't even my first thought. What filled my mind was the baby. How the drinking, the recklessness, the stress made no sense for someone who just weeks ago had told me how ready she was to become a mother. I couldn't even process what I'd just seen. She came home acting as if nothing had happened. The entire day, I barely said a word, lost in my thoughts. Suddenly, her distant behavior started to make sense. Later that night, while digging deeper online, I discovered the situation was far worse than I imagined. The video wasn't private, it had been posted publicly. One of the women from that party had uploaded it on social media. Whether it was a prank, a bid for attention, or sheer thoughtlessness, the clip spread like wildfire. A popular manosphere content creator found it and made an entire video about it, analyzing, mocking, and warning men to stay away from women like that. He didn't even blur out faces. That video had been circulating for at least a week before I even knew it existed. That evening, I called Sophia into the living room. She walked in, drying her hands on a towel, probably expecting a casual conversation. I sat down with my elbows on my knees, staring at the floor for a moment before finally meeting her gaze. "Is there something you need to tell me about Miami?" I asked. Her expression shifted immediately, as if she was mentally searching for a way out. "What do you mean?" she responded, defensively. That was the moment I realized she wouldn't confess unless cornered. So I didn't give her any space to dodge. I pulled out my phone, opened the video, and handed it over. "Watch this," I said. As the clip played, I watched her face closely. Her eyes grew wide, panic flooding her features. "It's not what it looks like," she blurted, quickly handing the phone back. "It was a dare," she gasped, struggling to catch her breath. "I didn't even know who that guy was. I was drunk." I looked at her, disbelief and anger rising. "Exactly. You were drunk, even though you promised me you wouldn't be. You're pregnant. You're married. And now I'm seeing you grinding on some stranger in front of a crowd. Do you realize how wrong that is?" I shook my head slowly. "The fact that you don't know who he is makes it worse. Only God knows what happened off camera. You really think that video shows the whole story? Probably not. It's likely just the part someone felt safe enough to share." She broke down then, collapsing to her knees, sobbing as she gripped my hand and begged me to believe her. "I didn't sleep with him. I swear on everything. It was just a kiss, nothing more." I wanted to trust her. But the more we talked, the more her story shifted. At first, she claimed not to know the man at all. Then she admitted he was probably the bartender. Later, she said a girl dared her to kiss him, but never mentioned climbing onto his lap. It was as if her memory was clouded or she was trying to protect me from the full truth. Every version of her explanation felt patched together, like a fragile cover-up. Even if she was telling the truth, I just couldn't feel it. That night, I couldn't bear the thought of sleeping beside her. Quietly, without a word, I grabbed a pillow and blanket and moved into the guest room. I could hear her crying softly in the bedroom. She kept coming to the door, knocking gently, whispering apologies. "Please, Victor, it was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen." But none of it brought me any comfort. I barely slept that night. Staring at the ceiling for hours, I kept asking myself the same agonizing questions. Was this really the first time something like this happened? Had she done this before and I never knew? And the worst part, I couldn't shake the thought that what I'd seen in that video was just the beginning. What happened when the camera stopped rolling? That uncertainty gnawed at me relentlessly. We never attended her sister's wedding. Neither of us spoke about it, but we both understood there was no way we could walk in pretending everything was normal. The idea of sitting there, smiling and mingling with people who might have already seen the video was unbearable. I didn't want to go. Sophia didn't argue. I think she knew what kind of storm she'd brought into our lives. In the weeks that followed, we tried therapy. I wasn't hopeful, but I agreed. Part of me still wanted to believe something could be salvaged. Sophia would break down in sessions, sobbing, saying she was ashamed, hating herself for ruining something good. I listened, physically present, nodding and responding, but emotionally distant. I didn't feel connected to her anymore. Then, another blow hit us. Sophia miscarried. When the doctor confirmed it, she shattered completely. I didn't know how to react. It was heartbreaking, but I realized I had been grieving long before that moment. Not just the baby, but the marriage itself. That miscarriage felt like the final breath of something already dying. After that, I didn't hesitate. I filed for divorce. I didn't care about money, possessions, or what people might say. I just needed out. That video haunted me every time I closed my eyes. I couldn't erase it. I couldn't fool myself into thinking things would ever go back to the way they were. My heart had shut down, and once that happens, there's no turning back. Years have passed since then, and I still find myself wondering about what might have been. Would things between Sophia and me have been different if she'd just refused to go to that party? If she'd stayed home? Would we have had the baby we dreamed of? Would our marriage still be intact? Those questions haunt me more often than I care to admit. It's impossible not to dwell on the endless what-ifs. But deep down, I know it's all meaningless now. What's done is done. I've learned to accept that. Sometimes you just have to let go, even when it hurts. Before I finish, I want to ask you something. If you were in my position, how would you have handled this? Would you have forgiven or walked away? Tried to fix what was broken, or known that ending things was the only option? I really want to hear your thoughts. Your perspective might help someone else going through something similar. Thanks for listening. If this story struck a chord with you or gave you something to reflect on, please like and share it. Sometimes sharing these experiences is the only way to remind us all that we're not alone. Take care.